New footage has surfaced showing The Undertaker destroying Hulk Hogan's grave, a shocking scene that has left wrestling fans stunned. The video captures The Undertaker furiously smashing the headstone, symbolically erasing Hogan's legacy in what feels like a personal act of vengeance. Whether this is part of a storyline or a deeper message, the intensity in Undertaker's actions has everyone talking, reigniting old rivalries and bringing back the dark energy that made him one of wrestling's most feared icons.
I'm nervous about taking the Tombstone.
Fans believe this shocking act is The Undertaker's way of settling an old score that began more than 3 decades ago at the 1991 Survivor Series, when Hulk Hogan accused him of almost breaking his neck. That moment marked the start of a legendary feud, and now, years later, it feels like the dead man is finally taking his revenge. On July 24th, 2025, the wrestling world was shaken to its core when news broke that Hulk Hogan, whose real name was Terry Gene Bollea, had passed away at the age of 71 from cardiac arrest. What began as an ordinary morning in Clearwater, Florida, ended in tragedy as emergency responders found him unresponsive in his home. Despite their best efforts, Hogan was pronounced dead at Morton Plant Hospital at 11:17 a.m. Eastern Time. The medical examiner ruled the cause as natural, citing a heart attack, though an official police investigation into the circumstances was still ongoing as of late August 2025. For those close to him, the loss, while devastating, was not entirely unexpected. Hogan had long battled serious health problems, including atrial fibrillation, multiple surgeries, and even leukemia treatment. After decades of punishing his body in the ring, the wear had finally taken its toll. No foul play was suspected, though his wife, Sky Daly, whom he married in 2023, hinted in later interviews that a possible medical error might have played a role, a claim never confirmed by authorities. News of his death spread instantly across social media as tributes poured in from fans, fellow wrestlers, and celebrities around the world. WWE released an official statement mourning the man who brought Hulkamania to life and turned professional wrestling into a global phenomenon. Fans across the globe flooded social media with memories of Hulk Hogan, his unforgettable body slam on, Andre the Giant at WrestleMania 3, his famous mantra about saying prayers and taking vitamins, and the red and yellow colors that defined an entire generation of wrestling. But among the countless tributes, one stood out not for what it said, but for what it didn't. The Undertaker, whose real name is Mark Calloway, posted a message on X, formerly Twitter, the very same day. For those familiar with the complicated history between these two legends, every word in that post carried a subtle but unmistakable weight. The tribute, which quickly gained over 119,000 likes and millions of views, was paired with 2 photos. One from their legendary 1991 Survivor Series showdown where The Undertaker first defeated Hogan for the WWF Championship, and another from their 2002 Judgment Day rematch. The caption was short, formal, and emotionally distant. The wrestling world has lost a true legend. His contributions to our business are immeasurable, and for that, I am appreciative. Thank you, Hulk Hogan. To casual fans, it seemed like a respectful message, but those who knew their long and often bitter rivalry could sense the chill behind the words. This wasn't a heartfelt farewell to a fallen friend. It was a measured acknowledgement, the kind that feels more like duty than grief.
Ladies and gentlemen, we lost one of the biggest and most globally recognized icons in the world. A man I grew up watching, was fortunate enough to share the ring with, and like so many of us, were honored to call a friend.
Major media outlets like Men's Journal, BBC News, and the Daily Mail covered The Undertaker's post, framing it as a respectful acknowledgement of Hulk Hogan's role in popularizing Hulkamania and revolutionizing WWE during the 1980s. Still, beneath the surface, many noticed the emotional distance. The Daily Mail pointed out that despite the duo's 3 singles matches being remembered for botches and inconsistent storytelling, The Undertaker's tribute stood as a subtle, restrained comment within a larger discussion about how Hogan had always divided opinions among his peers. That sense of coldness made even more sense when viewed in the context of recent events. Just months earlier, in early 2025, Hogan appeared on WWE Raw and was met with loud boos from the Los Angeles crowd, a shocking response for someone once adored as wrestling's ultimate hero. Later, on The Undertaker's 6 Feet Under podcast, when asked whether he felt sympathy for Hogan during that humiliating moment, he gave a blunt and unapologetic answer. No. He called it an ego pop and admitted that he actually laughed when it happened, revealing just how deep their old resentment still ran beneath the surface.
I feel like giving him a hug afterwards.
I know.
Here's Taker being a company man
Right.
Look,
Did you feel bad for him? No.
The professional wrestling world knew exactly what was unfolding. The Undertaker had long been openly critical of Hulk Hogan in interviews and on his 6 Feet Under podcast. often pointing to Hogan's backstage politics and ego-driven booking as the main sources of tension between them. This wasn't just a matter of storyline rivalry or scripted drama. This was genuine, long-standing resentment that had been simmering for more than 30 years. Yet, despite all the history, bitterness, and bruised pride, The Undertaker still managed to acknowledge what no one could deny. Hulk Hogan's influence on the world of professional wrestling was monumental. Without Hogan, there might never have been a WrestleMania III that drew 93,000 fans. Without Hogan, the Monday Night Wars might not have reached the heights they did. Without Hogan, wrestling might never have achieved the global fame it enjoys today. The Undertaker's tribute, though cold and measured, recognized this undeniable truth. And in doing so, it unintentionally sparked one of the strangest viral moments in wrestling's online history, a perfect storm of resurfaced footage, clickbait headlines, and the never-ending fascination with one of wrestling's most complicated rivalries, the moment that set. Everything in motion can be traced back to November 27th, 1991, a night that would define the uneasy relationship between The Undertaker and Hulk Hogan for the rest of their careers. It was Survivor Series, and The Undertaker, barely a year into his WWE run, was stepping into the spotlight to challenge Hogan for the WWF Championship in a match promoted as the Gravest Challenge. But before the lights, the cameras, and the roar of the crowd, something happened behind the curtain that would leave a scar lasting more than 30 years. As The Undertaker has recounted many times since, that night wasn't just another title, but it was a lesson in how manipulation, fear, and ruthless backstage politics could determine the fate of a rising star in the cutthroat world of professional wrestling.
He's already there. And I'm walking down the hall, just going to my locker room, and he goes, "Hey brother, can I talk to you?" I was like, "Yeah, sure, man. Yeah." I said, "Let me just drop my bag off." He's, "No, I'll come with you." So I go into the dressing room, I put my bag off. He goes, "Hey, let's go back here into the shower."
In the old school world of professional wrestling, being called into the shower to talk was never casual. It meant one of two things. Either a fight was about to break out to settle a dispute, or a matter so serious needed to be discussed away from prying eyes and ears. For a young Undertaker, still proving himself in the locker room, being pulled aside by Hulk Hogan, the company's biggest star, and Vince McMahon's prized golden goose, was an intimidating experience, no matter the reason. In that tense, echoing space, what should have been a moment of respect between two professionals instead became the beginning of a decades-long shadow over their relationship.
Go back into the shower, nobody can hear us, nobody talk. He goes, "Hey, I'm really nervous about taking the Tombstone. I got this bad neck."
Hogan, who had long struggled with neck problems from years of punishment in the ring, voiced deep concern about taking The Undertaker's signature move, the Tombstone piledriver. It was a devastating finisher that saw the opponent lifted upside down and driven headfirst toward the mat, a move that demanded flawless precision and complete trust between both wrestlers. Hogan's hesitation was understandable. Even when performed perfectly, the Tombstone looked and felt dangerous. For a veteran whose body had already endured decades of wear and tear, the idea of risking further injury in that moment carried real weight.
I was like, "Terry," I said, "Look, I promise you," I said, "I'll take great care of you. I don't need, you don't need to worry. I'll have you." I said, "Just don't worry about it. Well, I've got a lot of neck issues." I was like, "Well, and he said, "I'm going to do it. I just need you to know I got these neck issues." And I was like, "Brother, I promise you, your head will never touch."
But what followed went far beyond a routine pre-match talk about safety. According to The Undertaker's own account, Hogan simply wouldn't drop the subject. Throughout the day, whether they passed each other in catering, in the hallways, or anywhere backstage, Hogan kept bringing up his neck issues, repeatedly reminding The Undertaker to be careful. It wasn't just a casual mention. It became a constant refrain, planting a seed of doubt and unease before they ever stepped into the ring. For The Undertaker, a young star still earning his place among the veterans, it felt like subtle pressure, a reminder that one wrong move against the company's top name could end his career before it had truly begun.
Every time that I see him for the rest of the day, going through catering or whatnot, he gives me the old, don't forget what we talked about, right? He'd hold his neck, and, give me, "Brother." So it's starting to get to me a little bit. I'm about to beat Hulk Hogan for the world heavyweight title.
The psychological pressure on The Undertaker that night must have been overwhelming. This was his defining moment, the chance to become the youngest WWF champion in history, and prove he was ready to lead the company into a new era beyond Hulk Hogan's shadow. Yet here was Hogan, intentionally or not, getting inside his head just hours before the biggest match of his life. When the bell finally rang, The Undertaker stayed composed and executed the tombstone with flawless precision. The dramatic finish came when Ric Flair rushed to ringside and slid a steel chair into the ring, setting up The Undertaker to deliver his devastating tombstone directly onto it, securing the pinfall victory. In that instant, a new era seemed to dawn, but the real drama was only beginning.
I tell you, I had the man. And the man was, I've given my kids rougher bumps than I give Hogan.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, I wrap him up. I've got him. The chair comes down. Boom. As soon as my knees touch, right? Which, you know, oh, the big dude. Boom. As soon as my knees touch. Oh, brother, you got me. I'm like, oh, shit. Oh, I just crippled the golden goose. I just hurt Hogan.
In that moment, as Hogan lay on the mat selling the move as though he had been legitimately hurt, The Undertaker's world came crashing down. What was meant to be his crowning achievement the night he was officially anointed as the future of the WWF suddenly felt like a nightmare. Instead of celebrating his victory, he was gripped by panic, convinced that he had just crippled the company's biggest star and, in doing so, destroyed his own career before it had even truly begun.
I mean, I've gone from becoming champion till I'm going to probably get fired over this, right?
Yeah.
This is all running through my mind in the instant. Like, oh, crap. You know, he warned. I am just like in strict panic mode. He's laying there. Finally, he gets up and he leaves.
What should have been a moment of pure triumph quickly turned into a nightmare filled with guilt and fear. The Undertaker had just captured the WWF Championship, but as the stoic deadman character, he couldn't show any emotion or celebrate his victory in front of the crowd. On the outside, he remained calm and expressionless, exactly as his persona demanded, but inside, his mind was racing. Instead of feeling pride, he was bracing himself for the worst, terrified that he might have accidentally injured Hulk Hogan and doomed his own career in the process.
Laid on the floor.
Oh,
Got
no.
people all around him, you know. And I'm like, holy shit. So I'm going over, like, you know, check on him and, you know, apologize and everything else. Like, as soon as I start to get over there, here come the EMTs. And like, it's, you know, back then, and it was still kayfabe and everything. Everybody protected the business.
Backstage, the scene unfolded like something straight out of a medical drama. EMTs surrounded Hogan, checking his vitals, asking if he could move his fingers, and running through every precaution for a possible spinal injury. The atmosphere was tense and chaotic, with whispers spreading through the locker room. Meanwhile, The Undertaker, overwhelmed and unsure of what to do, hid behind a retaining wall in the restroom, listening to every word. Each sound the medic's questions, the worried voices cut deeper into his fear that he had just caused a real-life tragedy in the middle of what should have been his greatest night.
And, you know, I can hear the EMTs, you know, they're checking him out. And then all of a sudden I hear Hogan go, "Somebody get my wife and kids on the phone." I'm just like, oh. Anyway, they put him on the board, and then they put the board on the gurney. They take him off to the hospital.
Hogan was soon placed on a stretcher, carefully loaded into an ambulance, and rushed to the hospital, leaving the entire arena in stunned silence. Backstage, The Undertaker stood frozen, convinced that his career had just come to a devastating end. He had flown his family in from Houston to Detroit to share in what was supposed to be the proudest night of his life, even booking a fancy restaurant to celebrate his first championship win. But instead of joy, there was only dread. He couldn't eat, couldn't celebrate, couldn't think of anything, except that one moment, the tombstone replaying in his mind again and again as he questioned whether his dream had just turned into a career-ending mistake.
Everybody's telling me, like,
You're rationalizing it. The chair that's 2 inches higher than what you're used
everything.
to tombstoning.
Yeah.
He must have clipped it.
but everybody's coming up to
You're
me.
probably replaying what you actually did to Coco Beware.
Right. But everybody's coming. That's great. Yeah.
Not again.
Even Coco.
Not again.
Coco was probably at home rolling. See it, son of a bitch. No. So, but all the guys are coming up and saying, like, man, his head never touched.
But this is where the story takes its most infuriating turn. Back in 1991, wrestlers didn't have the instant access to monitors and playback that they do today. So The Undertaker had to wait several days before he could finally see the footage for himself. And when he did, all that guilt, fear, and anxiety turned to shock and anger, because what he saw on screen told a completely different story from the one he had been led to believe.
So it took a few days before I actually got to see the footage. Sure enough, my head never touched.
Right.
Here you go, Tony.
He was old school. Wow.
You can see how far his head is from the chair.
Wow. Yeah.
Hogan's head never even came close to hitting the canvas. The move had been executed flawlessly, exactly the way The Undertaker had promised. And yet, Hogan had sold it as if he'd been legitimately injured, leaving the arena in an ambulance and convincing the entire locker room that a serious accident had occurred. The fallout was almost as painful as the incident itself. WWE quickly announced a rematch for this Tuesday in Texas, a hastily put together pay-per-view just 6 days later, where Hogan would win back the championship. What should have been the start of The Undertaker's first long title reign was cut short before it could even begin. But the real blow came afterward, when The Undertaker finally confronted Hogan face to face, hoping for an explanation, and instead uncovered just how deep the manipulation had gone.
Yeah, brother. I was like, I watched the footage back of at Tombstone. He was like, yeah, brother, yeah. And I was like, your head never hit. He goes, oh yeah, brother. Well, what it was is that you had me so tight when you were protecting me, but you had me so tight that when I came down, like I didn't have any room to move, and it wrenched my neck. And I'm like, at that moment right there, and I knew. I said, okay. Like, what am I doing? I can't, I'm not gonna fight Hulk Hogan. That's definitely a red slip there, a pink slip. But it let me know everything that I needed to know at that time about who he was as a person.
Hogan's explanation that The Undertaker had supposedly held him too tightly, somehow injuring his neck despite his head never even touching the mat, was the final confirmation The Undertaker needed. This wasn't an accident or a simple misunderstanding. To him, it was classic Hogan politics, using his immense star power and backstage influence to protect his own position, even if it came at the expense of a younger wrestler's hard-earned momentum. When the wrestling world reflected on Hogan's death in July 2025, something extraordinary happened. For decades, the business had operated under an unspoken code: protect the business, never expose its secrets, and never speak ill of your peers, especially the dead. But Hogan's passing became a breaking point. It didn't spark disrespect, but rather unleashed a long-suppressed wave of honesty that the industry had kept buried for more than 30 years. In that moment, The Undertaker's earlier podcast comments suddenly felt prophetic. The rise of podcasts, tell-all memoirs, and social media had transformed wrestling into a space where truth could no longer be controlled by the powerful. The era when legends could shape their own myths without challenge was over. The empire Hulk Hogan helped build had grown into something far bigger than him, a new, transparent world where no matter how famous you once were, the truth always finds its way to the surface. The truth about Hulk Hogan was far too complicated for the kind of simple hero worship that once defined him. When he returned to WWE in January 2025 for a special Raw appearance, the reaction from the Los Angeles crowd made that crystal clear. Instead of the thunderous cheers and nostalgic chants that had always greeted him, he was met with a wall of boos that didn't let up. It was a defining moment, proof of how much the wrestling audience had changed. Fans were no longer content to separate the performer from the person. They knew the stories, the controversies, the manipulation behind the curtain, and now they refused to blindly celebrate a man whose legacy, while undeniably monumental, had been permanently stained by the truths that time and transparency had finally brought to light.
I felt like giving him a hug afterwards.
I know.
Here's Taker being a company man right now.
Right. Did you feel bad for him? No.
The Undertaker's blunt response on his podcast wasn't about cruelty, it was about honesty. It reflected a larger shift taking place throughout the wrestling world, where loyalty to the truth was finally taking precedence over loyalty to protecting someone's carefully built public image. For decades, The Undertaker had been the ultimate company man, a figure who upheld the code of silence and always put the business first. But now, he was drawing a clear line. There's a difference between protecting the business and protecting a lie, and he was done doing the latter. Yet even in this new era of transparency, one difficult question lingered. How do you reconcile a person's undeniable impact on history with their deeply flawed character? That's what made The Undertaker's stance so compelling, and arguably more mature than much of the reaction surrounding Hogan's death. He wasn't rewriting history or pretending Hogan hadn't been instrumental in shaping professional wrestling into what it became. The 1991 Survivor Series match, where The Undertaker defeated Hogan for his first world title, remains historically significant precisely because of who Hogan was at that time. The manipulation that followed doesn't erase the importance of that moment, it simply adds complexity to it. Acknowledging someone's influence doesn't mean ignoring their faults, and that's the delicate balance The Undertaker managed to strike. Both in his candid podcast remarks before Hogan's passing and in his restrained tribute afterward, he recognized Hogan's immeasurable contributions to the business while making it quietly, unmistakably clear that this was not a man he admired, not a colleague he respected, and not a friend he was mourning. The wrestling world watched all of this unfold in real time, and it revealed a striking generational divide in how fans and wrestlers processed Hulk Hogan's death. Older fans who had grown up during the peak of Hulkamania, an era before the internet pulled back the curtain, struggled to understand why the tributes weren't universally glowing. To them, Hogan was a hero, the man who brought wrestling into the mainstream, and they couldn't grasp why so many wrestlers seemed hesitant or restrained in their words. But younger fans, raised in the podcast era where wrestlers freely discussed backstage politics and personal conflicts, understood it immediately. They'd heard the stories, the tales of careers stalled because Hogan refused to lose his spot, the leaked recordings that exposed his racist remarks, the growing awareness of the divide between the character and the man behind it. For them, the measured tone of the tributes wasn't cold, it was honest. Even Hogan's 2002 matches with The Undertaker, once dismissed as slow and sloppy, took on new meaning in hindsight. Looking back, it was clear The Undertaker wasn't just wrestling Hulk Hogan, the performer. He was sharing the ring with a man who had once nearly sabotaged his career, a man whose ego and influence had shaped the industry in both groundbreaking and damaging ways. Every stiff shot, every visible moment of frustration, every awkward exchange in those matches made perfect sense when viewed through that lens. The funeral itself, held privately in Branson, Missouri, reportedly Hogan's favorite city, became another focal point for this evolving conversation. Some wrestlers attended in person, others sent flowers or issued formal statements, and a few, like The Undertaker, kept their distance while still acknowledging the magnitude of Hogan's impact on professional wrestling. But professional wrestling in 2025 had evolved far beyond the world Hulk Hogan once dominated. The industry he helped create had grown into something bigger, smarter, and far more self-aware, something no single superstar could control anymore. Authenticity and transparency had replaced the glossy illusion that defined the Golden Age. Wrestlers no longer needed to protect the myth. They could build their brands by telling the truth. Fans, too, had evolved. They weren't just spectators, they were historians, archivists, and critics who understood the difference between character and reality. The curtain hadn't just been pulled back. It had been ripped down completely. And in this new landscape, The Undertaker's approach made perfect sense. You don't have to sanctify someone to honor their significance. You don't have to rewrite your own history to preserve someone else's. You can tell the truth, that Hulk Hogan changed professional wrestling forever, and that he caused real harm along the way. The Undertaker, by refusing to sugarcoat his experiences, helped usher in a new era for the business, one where honesty replaced mythology, and where legacy wasn't immune to accountability. Hogan built his empire in a time when image was everything the tan, the neon colors, the catchphrases, the illusion of perfection. The Undertaker, by contrast, was born from silence and mystery. Fear, respect, and restraint were his tools. Two icons, two opposing philosophies, one loud and larger than life, the other stoic and disciplined. And in 2025, that contrast feels like the perfect metaphor for how wrestling itself has evolved from spectacle to substance, from kayfabe to truth. The fans who once cheered blindly now want context. They want receipts. They want the reality that lives behind the promos and the pyro. When a new clip or confession surfaces, they don't just watch it. They dissect it, timestamp it, archive it, turn it into evidence. The Undertaker, perhaps without realizing it, gave them exactly what they craved. Something real in a world that's always been scripted. And that's what made the viral grave footage so powerful. It wasn't just shocking, it was symbolic. For years, fans were sold the myth of Hulkamania. Say your prayers, eat your vitamins, believe in your heroes. But that version of wrestling died a long time ago. What The Undertaker did wasn't an act of destruction, it was an unmasking. And the timing couldn't have been more poetic. Hogan represented everything about wrestling's past, the control, the politics, the manipulation behind the curtain. The Undertaker's generation became the bridge between that world and what wrestling is today, a hybrid of reality and performance where authenticity is the gimmick. His message, whether intentional or not, was clear truth is the new spectacle. For decades, wrestling blurred the line between fiction and reality to keep fans guessing. Now, the fans blur it themselves, piecing together facts, leaks, and memories like detectives of the squared circle. And maybe that's why the image of The Undertaker standing over Hogan's shattered gravestone hit so deep. It felt like the industry itself was burying its own mythology. So when people ask what that moment really means, maybe it's not about revenge at all. Maybe it's about evolution. Hulk Hogan will always be the face of wrestling's golden age, the man who made it mainstream, for better or worse. But The Undertaker? He's the face of its reckoning. the quiet, methodical force who made fans realize that even the greatest icons have shadows. In a business that once revolved around who could sell the story, The Undertaker has now proven that the only story worth selling is the truth.